I came back from a 6-week special op in the Middle East. A mission with no name, no signal, no communication with the outside world. When my unit went dark, the Department of Defense filed it as missing in action. No death certificate, no funeral, just missing. And yet less than a month later, my wife went to the local records office and had me declared dead. Then she got married. To my best friend. The one who swore he'd look after her while I was gone. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just started collecting pieces, one by one, until the picture came into focus. I wasn't just forgotten. I was replaced, deliberately, on paper, in plans, in a whole new life built around the death of someone still breathing. This isn't a war story. It's not a tale of heartbreak either. It's about what happens when a man comes back, not to win someone back, but to drag the truth into the light, line by line, name by name, and this time, through the law. If you're curious how he slowly took back everything that was rightfully his, don't forget to like and subscribe to catch the next part. My name is Thomas Greer. I'm 33 years old, Navy SEAL Team 6. We were deployed on a covert mission in Syria at the end of January. Nothing flashy or explosive like in the movies. Mostly recon, logistical support, sometimes complete radio silence. The mission was set for 3 weeks, but things didn't go as planned. A small landslide hit after a storm and knocked out our comms. We were cut off. No satellite signal, no way to report in. Part of the unit moved to a temporary post, and I stayed back with one teammate to guard the equipment. That was week 2. Then I got hit with a high fever. No clear cause. They medevaced me out to a military field hospital near the Turkish border. I ended up stuck there for almost a month. When I was finally strong enough to hold my phone, I asked a nurse if I could call home. She said all personal communications were restricted under mission protocol. Not even a patient name list was being sent back to the US. I didn't argue. I knew how the system worked. If no one could confirm you were alive, your family would assume the worst. I returned to base in the States in early April. 6 weeks off the radar. No notice. No one knew I was alive except some clerk in the personnel office. I called my wife, Emma. No answer. Texted. Nothing. I got in my truck and drove straight to our old place in San Diego. Same white-painted front door, same curtains. But the mailbox had a new name. The nameplate near the door? Gone. A new keypad lock had replaced the old deadbolt, not the one we installed together. I stood there on the curb and opened a real estate app. Searched the address. The house had been sold over 2 weeks ago. New owner. A name I didn't recognize. It wasn't mine anymore, and it wasn't hers either. I stayed there for a few minutes, just standing, not really waiting for anything in particular. Maybe some kind of sign, a reason, an explanation. But nothing came. Just the wind pushing through that familiar old street in April. I turned away, and that's when I started to understand. Some things had changed completely, long before I even knew I'd been erased from that life. I called my mom. She didn't answer either, but I knew where she'd be. Same place she always was. I turned the truck around, and I swear, for the first time in my life, I was afraid to go home. Not because I'd been left behind on a battlefield, but because I was about to face something even worse. I drove out to my mom's house, about 40 minutes north of San Diego. She still lived in the same place in the suburbs of Oceanside, the house I grew up in. The door was still painted that same soft blue. The front yard was still lined with the lavender bushes I planted before my last deployment. I didn't call ahead. Just parked, walked up the steps, and knocked. When she opened the door, she froze, still holding a dish towel in her hand. She looked at me like she was staring at a ghost. All I said was, "I'm home." Her hands trembled as she pulled me into a hug. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just held on, like she was afraid if she let go, I'd disappear again. We sat at the kitchen table, same as always. She made tea, the kind I liked. I gave her the short version, the lost connection, the field hospital, the classified holdup. She didn't ask many questions, but I could tell she was holding something back. Eventually, she set her tea down, went to a drawer, and pulled out a thin folder. She slid it across the table toward me. Inside was a death certificate. My name, Thomas Greer. Date of declaration, exactly 30 days after I'd gone dark. I flipped through more pages. Documentation from the local office, a benefits claim form, filed by Emma Greer. I said nothing. No anger, no shock. Just silence, like someone had sucked the sound out of the room. Mom looked at me, then said carefully, "Emma didn't wait for the military to issue anything official. She filed for your death certificate on the exact 30th day. No one understood why it was so fast." I didn't respond. She went on, softer now. 3 weeks later, she got married to David. I looked up. "David?" She nodded. "David Grant. Your high school friend. The one who served and got out a few years ago. They reconnected after he transferred back to San Diego. But I didn't think." I leaned back in the chair. It felt like someone had stuffed cold rocks into my chest. David and I grew up together. Different deployments, but we kept in touch. I had even asked him to look out for Emma while I was gone. Mom placed her hand on mine. "You don't have to go back there," she said. "That house is gone. I heard from the neighbors. They moved out right after the wedding." I looked out the window. Sunlight was still pouring across the front lawn. A regular afternoon, just like any other. Except now, I had no idea where I fit in my own life anymore. I stayed at my mother's house for a few days. No one knew I had come back, and honestly, I had no reason to make it known. I needed time. More importantly, I needed to understand what had actually happened, step by step. No assumptions, no skipped details. I started with the bank. That was the account I had been using to send money home every month while I was deployed. Even after being offline for over 6 weeks, I still remembered the login credentials for our joint account. Every paycheck, I'd send most of it back. The rest was just enough for day-to-day needs overseas. But this time, when I logged in, the balance was completely wiped out. I pulled up the transaction history and saw one massive withdrawal. Everything I had deposited over the last 6 months, taken out exactly 30 days after I went dark. The note said, "Authorized withdrawal, per internal agreement." I had never signed anything like that. And the signature on record? Definitely not mine, but it was my name. I sat there frozen for a moment, then kept scrolling. 2 weeks after that transaction, another one popped up. This time, not from a bank, but from the Department of Defense. Death benefits, $250,000. Clearly marked for KIA, killed in action. It all became clear. The order of events was exact. Emma emptied the joint account first, then used a falsified death claim to collect the life insurance payout. After that, she sold the house. As my widow and legal co-owner, she had every right to do so if I were actually dead. I pulled the property records. The sale had gone through a real estate broker, and the price was below market value, probably to close the deal quickly. The sale had been finalized just 3 weeks ago. I called Ryan. He used to serve in my unit and now works in the military records office. I asked him one question. "Did the DoD ever issue a death certificate for me?" He paused, then said, "No. Your file was marked MIA, missing in action. No official death notification was ever sent. Any documents filed outside that are unofficial." I asked him to dig deeper, just to be sure. And just like I suspected, there was no formal death record from the military. But I did find something else. A scanned copy of a temporary declaration submitted for local financial assistance. It stated I was confirmed deceased, no remains recovered, signed by Emma Greer, witnessed by David Grant. I ended the call. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't even shocked. I was just still. This had been planned for a long time. If I was going to take this further, I'd need someone with deeper access. So I called Mark, a former military police officer I served with, now working in federal civilian investigations. He handles identity fraud and record tampering cases tied to military to civilian crossover crimes. I said one sentence. "I need the current address of Emma and David." Mark didn't ask why. When someone's been in the trenches with you, one sentence is enough. 2 days later, I got a secure, encrypted message. Scottsdale, Arizona. Vista Mar Complex. Lease under David Grant. Utilities and internet registered to Emma Greer. Lease start date, March 17th. I read it over and over. There was no mistake. Emma hadn't just left the state. She had started a new life, a stable one, with her real name, no aliases, no attempts to hide. Maybe because she didn't believe I'd ever come back. I didn't react, didn't call, didn't text. I just opened my laptop, created a new folder, and started documenting everything. Because this time I wouldn't be speaking. The law would. I started by calling a lawyer named Blake. We'd met a few years back when I needed to set up an emergency power of attorney before a long deployment. Blake knew military law, civil law, and, more importantly, how those two systems often failed to line up cleanly. He was one of the few people I trusted to navigate the gap between what was legal and what was right. I sent him everything I had: the falsified death certificate, the joint bank account history, the death benefit transaction, the house sale documents, and the new address where Emma was living. Blake went quiet for a long moment after reviewing everything. Then he looked up and said, "We have everything we need to begin." He filed a formal complaint with the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Military Benefits Management Office. The allegation: fraudulent death declaration to obtain government benefits. Under federal law, that's classified as financial fraud. If intent can be proven, it becomes a criminal case. At the same time, Blake filed a civil lawsuit in the state of California, accusing Emma of unauthorized transfer of shared real estate property while the co-owner was still legally alive and without any formal confirmation of death from the Department of Defense. We spent nearly a month assembling the case. Every piece of evidence was copied 3 times. One for the civil attorney, one for the VA, and one for the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division, CID. Blake accompanied me to the CID office for the initial filing. He told me, with what we had, this wasn't just a civil matter anymore. This was military record fraud. And that meant potential federal criminal charges. Standing in the CID office, I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired. Tired of having to prove to the world that I had existed, that I had lived, and survived. Inside the packet we submitted to CID was everything. The fake email Emma used, supposedly sent from a military source, but traced back to a public cafe. The IP logs that led to David, the unauthorized withdrawal records, the incomplete death certificate. I even included a recording of my friend, the former military police officer, confirming that no official death notice had ever been issued for me by the DoD. I thought the story had already reached its lowest point: betrayal, fraud. A whole new life built on my erasure. But I was wrong. That was only the surface. The real rot, the part they thought I'd never see, was buried deeper. A week after we filed, Blake called again. He told me there were a few inconsistencies in the documents Emma submitted to the local authorities. Specifically, an attachment she claimed was an official statement from the military unit. I told him to send me everything, unedited, unfiltered. Among the files was an email. It looked official, military address formatting and all. But there was one tiny character off. Just one. The message stated that I had perished during the mission, and that the unit was in the process of confirming remains for official notification to next of kin. This was the document Emma used to declare me dead. I forwarded the email to Ryan, the old friend of mine who now works in military law enforcement. Less than half a day later, he called me back. The IP address didn't trace back to any military network. It came from a public coffee shop in San Diego. The sender? A freshly created email account, completely unlinked from any official database. The location? Just 3 blocks from my old house. And the timestamp? 3 days before Emma submitted the death certificate. I didn't need any more proof. The person who created that fake military email was David. I sat in silence for a while. All the fragments of suspicion I'd been carrying suddenly clicked into place like a map folding open. My death wasn't a tragic event they took advantage of. It was part of the plan. A plan built with intention, detail, and time. I combed through every financial transaction. $250,000 in death benefits, $400,000 from the sale of our house. Not long after, all that money was funneled into a business account. Company name, Vista Horizon LLC, registered in Arizona. Legal representative, David Grant. Business type, home maintenance, repair, interior design. The company was incorporated less than 2 weeks after the death benefit landed. I even found a job posting from them. In the company bio, it read, "We're a young family business born from adversity, dedicated to sustainability." I actually laughed. Adversity, of their own making. I don't know if Emma cried when she first heard I was missing. Maybe she shed a few tears. Maybe not. But one thing I do know for certain, she wasn't shocked. Because she already knew. And maybe, just maybe, she had hoped for it. 2 weeks later, once all the paperwork was finalized, I flew to Arizona. Not to confront them. Not to speak. Just to personally deliver a file to the exact address where Emma now lived. No doorstep drop-off. No emails. I was going to place it in their hands myself. The drive from my hotel to their neighborhood took 10 minutes. I parked a short distance away. Sat in the car for a while, watching the afternoon sunlight stretch across the lawn in front of their unit. Everything looked quiet, tidy, normal. I got out carrying the envelope, walked past 2 homes, then stopped in front of door number 237. I knocked. Footsteps echoed inside, a rhythm I recognized. The door opened. It was David. We stared at each other for a few seconds. Neither of us spoke. His eyes widened. He stood in the doorway, frozen, like he couldn't quite believe I was real. I was the one who broke the silence. I looked him straight in the eye and said calmly, "Your new family looks happy. Looks." Then I stepped inside. He didn't stop me. Didn't say a word. The house was simple, newly furnished, clean and bright. 2 plates sat half-finished on the dining table. The smell of warm food still lingered in the air. Somewhere near the window, a soft jazz tune was playing from a small speaker. Emma was sitting with her back to the door, holding a glass of water. When she saw me walk in, she turned and jumped to her feet. A spoon clattered to the floor. The metallic sound against tile was sharp, unmistakable. She didn't speak. Her eyes were wide. Her hands trembled. I looked at the scene in front of me. A cozy midday lunch between 2 people who once meant everything to me. A kind of peace I hadn't known in a long time. I looked at Emma, then said quietly, "I just wanted to see what my wife's new life looked like." Less than a month after her husband went missing. No one answered. I didn't wait for them to. I placed the envelope on the table. No names. No decoration. Just one bold printed line. Legal documentation. Criminal and civil action filed. I stood there a few seconds longer, watching them both, still frozen like statues. There was nothing more to say. They'd open it. They'd read it. They'd understand. I turned and walked out. The door closed softly behind me. No loud click, no final slam. But I knew. The loudest sound was just beginning inside that house. Less than a week after the documents were filed, David was officially summoned by the Army's Criminal Investigation Division. The charge stated clearly on the subpoena: impersonation of a military officer for financial gain. In the eyes of the law, this wasn't just some personal deception. It was a direct violation of the integrity of the National Military Records System. There was no room left for denial. CID had traced the entire path of the fake email. They had the IP address, logged from a public Wi-Fi network. The exact timestamp matched Emma's death certificate submission. The device used? A laptop that had logged into David's personal email account that same day. And the final nail? A security camera recording from the cafe. David, sitting in the back corner, hands on the keyboard, at the exact moment the email was sent. Meanwhile, Blake had officially filed the civil lawsuit. We demanded the full amount of the death benefit, $250,000, plus the sale value of the house, $400,000. On top of that, we requested additional compensation for reputational damage, emotional distress, and all legal costs incurred during the evidence-gathering process. The total wasn't small, but when weighed against everything they had stolen from me, a marriage, a home, and even my existence as a living man, it still didn't come close. I didn't file the lawsuit to put anyone behind bars. I didn't need someone locked away for years to feel vindicated. That's up to the courts. What I wanted was justice. I wanted the truth, written in black and white. A truth that couldn't be erased from any record or explained away by emotions or convenient misunderstandings. I was no longer just a shadow of a soldier returned from the dead. I was a man standing upright, fully documented, fully aware, with a case no one could dismiss. About 2 days after word got out that David had been summoned, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it ring until the very end. A message came through moments later. It was from David. He wrote, "Thomas, if you're willing, I'd like to settle this. We can talk. You know I never meant to hurt you." I didn't reply. The next day, I received another message, this time from Emma. No subject line, nothing flashy, just a familiar email address I had once saved in my contacts with a little heart beside it. She started with a single line. "I know I have no right to contact you anymore." She said she was sorry, that everything that happened came from a place of loneliness. She explained that in the early days, when she heard I was missing, she was terrified. She called my unit over and over, but no one gave her a straight answer. There was no KIA list, no official statement, just an endless echoing silence. And in that silence, David was there. Always close, always ready with suggestions. He told her this was an opportunity. "Isn't this good news?" he said. They could finally be together without guilt, without hiding. She said David used to work with military legal services and knew the language, the protocol, the loopholes. He told her exactly how to verify a death in a way that looked real. Emma said she hesitated at first, but David insisted. Just file the paperwork once, get it over with, and life could return to normal. "He's not coming back," he said. "And even if he is, do you really think he'll forgive you for letting him die in your heart?" She admitted David wrote the fake email. He chose the sender address, crafted every word to mimic an official tone. She was the one who printed it, who submitted it. But every step, every decision, came with his hand guiding hers. She didn't deny that she went along with it. She didn't excuse herself, but she wrote that the hardest part, the part that broke her, was realizing that she never once felt guilty, not until the moment she saw me walk into that house. She wrote, "That was when I understood. You were still alive. And everything we had, everything David and I built, was standing on the grave of someone who hadn't died." I read the email. Once. No rereads. No reply. I didn't need to forgive her. And she didn't write it to be forgiven. She wrote it because finally, she understood exactly what she had chosen. And I, for the first time, understood something too. I didn't lose Emma to war. I lost her to a plan, carefully made, quietly executed, where love, if it ever existed, had long been traded for something safer, easier, and far, far smaller. The last I heard of David came from someone I knew who worked at the courthouse. After being summoned for a second hearing, he never showed up for the preliminary session. A week later, a warrant was issued, this time signed by the FBI. Falsifying military documents to defraud the federal government isn't just a civil matter, it's a federal crime. And there's no gray area in the law for anyone who tries to run. Emma didn't run. She received her judgment nearly 3 months after the investigation began. Once all the financial records were reviewed and verified, she was ordered to repay the entire death benefit, every cent of the $250,000. On top of that came the penalties, legal fees, and civil damages related to the unauthorized transfer of our old home. There was no prison sentence, but the ruling was enough. A few weeks later, she filed for personal bankruptcy. Their business account, Vista Horizon, was frozen. All jointly held assets were seized. The whole young family rebuilt from adversity collapsed before it ever had the chance to become real. I didn't go back to the military. I didn't return to the old house. I didn't try to reclaim anything that had once belonged to the life they built while I was gone. Instead, I bought a small house on the outskirts of town, just 10 minutes from my mother's place. Single story, 2 bedrooms, a backyard big enough for a few rows of vegetables, and a wooden chair that faces west in the late afternoon. I don't use social media. I don't answer calls from reporters. I've never appeared on any of the news segments about the soldier who came back from the dead. I didn't come back to be celebrated, and I didn't come back to make anyone regret what they did. I came back from the dead, and this time, I lived to expose the truth. Thank you for staying until the end. If you want to hear more real stories like this, hit subscribe so you won't miss the next video.